Highlighting history of suburban Sydney with the St Peter's Cooks River History Group.
Our aim is to preserve and promote local history.
We are based at St Peter's in Sydney's inner west.
North Sydney has always been an important link between the north and south of Sydney Harbour. Ferries, tram and train travel, the Harbour Bridge, Warringah Expressway and Harbour Tunnel all led to change and upheaval.
Robert Campbell purchased Robert Ryan's land on the waterfront between Lavender and Creening Bays. In 1807 he built Australia's first shipbuilding yards. The site is now occupied by the Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron at Kirribilli.
James Milson leased land from Campbell and established a business supplying ships with stone ballast, fresh water and products from his dairy, orchard and vegetable gardens.
Ex-convict Billy Blue was granted land at what is now Blues Point. He commenced a ferry service across the harbour.
George Lavender's land was adjacent to Billy Blue. Lavender was a boatswain on the hulk Phoenix, which was used to house the overflow of prisoners from Sydney Jail. The hulk was anchored in Hulk Bay, today's Lavender Bay.
In 1836, St Leonard's Township was laid out in the area of the present-day Miller, Walker, Lavender and Berry Streets.
Churches were established in the 1840s and 50s.
The Anglicans built the first St Thomas's in 1843. The present church was completed in 1886.
St Thomas's Rest Park opened in 1974. The former cemetery site had been used for burials since the 1840s.
The Sexton's Cottage has been restored and turned into a museum.
The Jesuits established St Mary's in 1856. The first permanent building was opened 12 years later. The foundation stone for the present church was laid in 1937.
The foundation stone of the first Methodist church on the North Shore was laid in 1864. The property was resumed in 1931 for the construction of approaches to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. A church memorial, originally a sundial, was unveiled in 1939.
The Presbyterians erected St Peter's in 1844. It was rebuilt in 1866. The church buildings are now used by various congregations.
Watonga, today's Admiralty House, was built in 1843. Purchased by the New South Wales Government in 1885, it became the official residence for Royal Navy commanders. It has been the Australian Governor-General's Sydney residence since 1913.
Kirribilli House, built in 1855, was acquired by the Commonwealth Government in 1920. After refurbishment, it has been used as a prime ministerial residence since 1958.
In 1866, Charles Bullivant became the owner of the Sailor's Return Hotel on the corner of Miller and Berry Streets. He renamed it the Rag and Famish. It became the North Shore Hotel in 1873. Burnt down during a bushfire, it was rebuilt in 1892. The words North Shore Hotel can be seen on the first-storey wall. It was known as the North Star before becoming the Rag and Famish again in 1982.
St Leonard's Park, originally known as the Reserve, was set aside for public recreation and cricket in 1867. The Oval became the home ground for the North Sydney Cricket Club in the 1890s. It is best known as the home of the North Sydney Rugby League team, which became known as the North Sydney Bears during the 1950s, after accepting a sponsorship from the Big Bear supermarket at Neutral Bay.
St Leonard's School opened in 1874. 3 years later, a stone building was constructed. For many years it was known as Greenwood School, after Nimrod Greenwood, a popular and respected headmaster. The name was changed to North Sydney Public School in 1910. It was North Sydney Technical High School prior to 1992, when it became the Greenwood Hotel, today a feature of the Greenwood Plaza shopping complex.
In 1890, the boroughs of St Leonard's, East St Leonard's and Victoria were amalgamated to form the Municipality of North Sydney.
Kelrose, a former residence and hospital, was purchased for use as council chambers in 1925. A mirror image extension of the existing building was opened in 1938.
The 1880s North Sydney Post Office and former courthouse are still in their original locations.
In 1886, a cable tramway ran from the original Milsons Point ferry wharf where the Harbour Bridge's North Pylon now stands. The route was along Alfred Street, Junction Street, the current Pacific Highway, and Miller Street to the engine house and depot at Ridge Street.
The depot, having been converted to electric operation, closed in 1909 and a new depot was opened.
The North Shore Railway line opened from Hornsby to St Leonards in 1890. Passengers were transported by horse-drawn bus between St Leonards Station and the ferry terminal at Milsons Point.
The railway extension from St Leonards to Milsons Point opened in 1893. The original station was located on the site of Luna Park.
In 1915, in preparation for building a bridge across the harbour, a temporary station and ferry wharf were established at Lavender Bay. This line was in use until a new Milsons Point station was built in 1932. It is now the North Sydney Car Sidings Line.
Milson Park was created during the 1890s when the head of Careening Cove was reclaimed. The foreshores were used for boat building and repair, which remained a local industry until the 1960s.
North Sydney Fire Station operated from 1895 until 1945. Today the Firehouse Hotel. Cantilevered above it is a 50-storey mixed-use tower.
In 1911, the cable tram sheds were converted to a theatre and hall.
The North Sydney Coliseum Theatre was later named the Deluxe. From the 1940s, it had various uses until remodelled into apartments known as Regency Park.
The hall was used by Harry Clay as part of his vaudeville circuit and other entertainments which included boxing. It was relicensed as the Coliseum Theatre in 1937. The Independent Theatre Company opened there in 1939. The building is now owned by Winona School.
The Mary MacKillop Memorial Chapel was completed in 1914 to house the remains of Sister Mary MacKillop. The museum at Mary MacKillop Place tells the story of Australia's first Catholic saint.
The tender for the construction of a bridge was awarded to English engineering firm Dorman Long and Company in 1924. Work began on the bridge the following year. The Sydney Harbour Bridge was completed in 1932.
51 Mount Street was originally a Bank of New South Wales built in 1931.
Luna Park, a classic amusement park, opened in 1935. There have been various versions of the iconic face.
The following year, the North Sydney Olympic Pool opened. In 1938, it hosted the Empire Games, predecessor of the Commonwealth Games.
In 1948, one of Australia's most significant public housing developments, Greenway Flats, was commenced on land left vacant after the construction of the Harbour Bridge. When opened in 1954, it was the largest flat development in the country.
In 1960, the Ensemble Theatre opened in an old boat shed at Kirribilli.
The construction of the Warringah Freeway in the 1960s provided an important transport corridor for Sydney, but led to the demolition of hundreds of houses, public buildings and local landmarks, such as the North Sydney Orpheum.
The MLC building, completed in 1957, was the first high-rise office block in North Sydney.
Harry Seidler and Associates were architects of Blues Point Tower. When completed in 1962, it was Australia's tallest residential building.
In the 1970s and 80s, North Sydney was transformed into a commercial hub. The low-rise Victorian and Federation shopping centre buildings were replaced by office towers. These attracted insurance, advertising, computing and banking businesses.
The office building at 60 Miller Street was the location of the former Federal Hotel, and later the Art Deco interwar Victoria Cross Hotel, which was demolished in the 1970s.
North Point Tower at 100 Miller Street was completed in 1977. The 34-level office tower rises over a retail podium.
In 1979, North Sydney Council purchased St Leonard's Cottage. Originally an 1840s four-bedroom timber dwelling, the present building was completed by the 1890s. Today, the Don Bank Cottage Museum.
Old homes are still standing within educational establishments.
The convent of Mont St Angelo was formerly a house called Massaloo, previously owned by Francis Lord.
The Sydney Church of England Grammar School, Shaw, is on the site of Bernard Halterman's residence. In 1885, the mansion was bought by the Anglican Church and became part of the school. Graithwaite, originally called Euroka, was built in 1833. The former private home and hospital has been restored by the school.
At Loreto Kirribilli, Ellamang, Carina, Tremaine and the Hermitage.
Whyalla is part of St Aloysius College.
The Comic Walk, or Peter Kingston Walkway, is located in Arthur Barton Park at Milsons Point. Many sculptures feature Australian characters such as Bib and Bub, Ginger Meggs, the Magic Pudding and Blinky Bill. There is a memorial to those who lost their lives in the Luna Park ghost train fire in 1979.
Wendy's Secret Garden at Lavender Bay was built by Wendy Whiteley on abandoned waterfront land as a memorial to her artist husband Brett and daughter Archie.
Constant change has been a feature of North Sydney. In 1909, Henry Lawson's poem, Old North Sydney, described what was happening then and continued in the years to come.
They're shifting Old North Sydney, perhaps is just as well. They're carting off the houses where the old folks used to dwell. But now we're busy strangers, our feelings we restrain. The spirit of North Sydney shall never come again.
View our video on another part of North Sydney, Neutral Bay. If you have enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Coming soon, The Changing Face of Woolloomooloo. And check out our website, stpeterscooksriverhistory.wordpress.com. Visit us the first Saturday of every month from 1:30 to 4:30, 187 Princess Highway, St Peters.